last year I said. So in this set of videos, we're going to be installing a solar panel and a bunch of lights, but first there's a few other things I'd like to do. Now that we've finished painting, built this folding bed, and added this access panel, all that's left to do is replace this door, and then we can get started on the electrical system. I'm going to make a new door to replace the old one out of pallet wood, so the first step was to disassemble some pallets. Once I had enough wood, it was time to start sanding. I didn't have a joiner at the time, so I made this jig to joint the boards with my table saw. I'm going to glue all the boards together into a panel. To do this, I'll need some big clamps. They're pretty expensive, so I decided to make my own. It's finally time to glue the panel together. I started by laying out all the boards and arranging them how I want them. Then I laid out 2 of the parts for my homemade clamps and started gluing all the boards together on top of them. The clamps weren't big enough to glue the whole panel at once, so I'm going to do it in 2 halves. I put the second half of the clamps over the panel and put some dowels between the two. Then I drove in some wedges between the panel and the dowel. Once both halves of the panel were dry, I glued them together and put some weights on top to keep them in place. While the glue dried, I started repainting some of the trim. Next, I cut the panel to the correct size. Then it was time to get the belt sander out to get rid of the height differences between some of the boards and start smoothing it out. I filled all the nail holes with wood filler and sanded it down again with my random orbital sander to remove the excess wood filler and finish making it nice and smooth. It's finally time to test it out and see if it actually fits, and of course it's nowhere close. It turns out the whole door frame leans to the right, and it will be much easier to adjust the door than to fix the whole door frame. Somehow I managed to lose a whole bunch of footage, so here's what I did. I trimmed the top and bottom of the door so that the door fits in the frame even though it's crooked. I tested it and it fit pretty well, so I prepared a bunch more pallet wood and started adding a whole bunch of trim to the front of the door with glue and some brads to make it sturdier and to look better. Then it was time to test it again. This time I unscrewed the hinges from the old door and mounted it with one screw on each hinge. And it looks great, but it doesn't quite close. So I took it back down and trimmed a little bit off one of the edges. I reattached the hinges, still with just one screw, and hung the door up again. I noticed the door was warping a lot, so I put it flat on the floor and put some weights on it to flatten it out, and then left it for a few weeks. During that time, I tried to fix another problem. Some animal was getting in and leaving lots of nutshells and dirt everywhere. You can even see that the edge of the floor was chewed. So I cut some strips of window screening and stapled them over these gaps the whole way around the walls. I'm pretty sure the reason that the door was warping was that all the trim on the front was keeping that side from expanding, but the back had nothing to keep it from swelling up from moisture. So I added some strips of wood on the back to hold it together, and that seemed to fix the problem. It also made the doorway stiffer. I hung up the door again, and after making sure it's still closed, I added the rest of the screws. Next, I marked where the doorknob needs to go and drilled a large hole through the door for it. I also drilled a hole through the edge of the door for the latch. While I was drilling this one, it broke through the side of the door because it's slightly thinner than a normal door, so I just glued it back in place. I had to carve out the edge of the hole a bit for the latch to fit, and then I screwed the latch on. Now the door is basically finished, it just needs a coat of paint, so I took it down and started painting. And it's finished. The only thing left to do is to give the place a quick clean so that we're ready to start the electrical system in the next video. That's all we need to do before we start the electrical system, so that's the end of this video. The next video will be starting that, so don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. Bye.